The band were originally called The Farm, but not long after Peter Garrett joined, they morphed into Midnight Oil and started playing their first gigs at the Royal Antler in the Sydney suburb of Narrabeen. Peter Garrett tells Richard Kingsmill about what the band was like when he first joined.
They were younger than I was, and as far as I was concerned, they were pretty wet behind the ears, and I thought they were terrific players, you know. I remember first hearing Rob, you know, hit the kit, and I thought, yeah, this guy really belts this thing to death, you know, this is spot on the business, this is deadly music. But they were very different kinds of people from me, and I think they felt the same way about me, that I was kind of remote and just surfing and turning up and singing and jumping around a bit. And so when we finished, I just went straight back to ANU. I didn't even think about them again.
Garrett had initially joined the band hoping to earn a little money while going on a surfing expedition along the coast. Surfing has always been important to the lead singer. In fact, his trademark bald head was largely the result of his love of waves.
Well, it wasn't a show business decision, you see. It was a surfing decision. And, you know, I was helping my brother take surf photos. He was trying to get photos in tracks, and every time, you know, you did something, you sort of had to deal with the added hassle of having hair around the place, so it just went, you know. It was an irritation that we really didn't need.
So it's something that you really, you know,
I was a fascist when it came to my hair. I mean, it wasn't a rebellious act. I mean, I'd already been a rebellious dude. I mean, I'd had my 2 earrings, you know, in the ANU law school, and they wanted to chuck me and another guy out of the law school, wouldn't give us our degrees because we had earrings, if you can believe it. But I mean, that's what it was like in those days. So it wasn't a rebellion thing. I mean, my rebellion, and I think Midnight Oil's rebellion, is very much other than the a rebellious attitude that's on the surface.
Ever since the lineup of the band was settled, with Garrett ensconced as lead singer, the band decided to work outside the mainstream music industry, famously refusing to go on Countdown and play by the rules.
Where the industry was a bad place, you know, basically. And it was pop fodder, it was churn and burn, and it was for 14-year-old girls. It still is to some extent that, but that's all it was, really. If you took it from Countdown, that's all you got. You didn't get anything else. And the other thing about it was that it was an industry, once again, that was, you know, if it doesn't come from America, it's no good. And people were singing in American accents, if you can believe it. And they were actually copying music from overseas. And they felt like to be successful as an Australian band, they actually had to be successful in another country. And we really basically totally rejected that from day one. The second thing, I think, is that our own identity and our own sense of what we were doing had to happen and had to be built on our own experiences, on our own mistakes, and, you know, if you like, on our own sweat. So I think we just didn't find, as kind of young guys who were very idealistic about our music, that we had much in common with the industry. So we went into headbutting mode.
The band slowly built their audience while touring up and down the east coast of Australia, allowing the surfaholic Garrett time to hit the waves.
You had absolutely nothing else on your mind and no other responsibilities. Certainly have stuff like families and even a career to think about. You know, you didn't have any of those things to think about. All you had to think about was, can we get ourselves to that point, you know, without the car breaking down or without whatever. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I idealise it when I look backwards, because it was a hard grind and I wouldn't want to do that again particularly. But there were points where you're sleeping 3 or 4 up in a room and, you know, you're sharing a Chico roll and you're going out to do a show, you know, and you're sort of thinking, well, we'll either fall over or we'll survive. And if we survive, we've done it together.
Here's Peter explaining to Richard Kingsmill how the band remained staunchly independent.
We very quickly discovered that we much preferred having that one-on-one relationship with the audience, you know, that this was a much more real way of existing as a musician in the country, no matter how much we were being noticed otherwise. If we could go back somewhere and play somewhere and connect with people in that pub or in that club or at that uni or whatever, then that was what we were doing, and that was how we were going to build our career.
Were you getting through to people in Adelaide and Melbourne and Brisbane?
Well, it was slow. It began. I mean, we played to 11 people when we first went to Melbourne, and we were the darlings here at that stage of the inner city. But then again, we've continued to do that all through our career.
Even so, Rob freely admits that the band wouldn't be able to build their career the same way nowadays.
Nowadays, if you wanted to play 6 nights a week, every week, you'd quickly run out of venues. Then, before the noise and fire regulations, before the advent of dance music clubs, you know, that whole scene, it was pop and rock music. That's all you did. And a lot of bands actually made a really good living. And these weren't bands that were necessarily getting much commercial airplay. And, yeah, I mean, the first 4 or 5 years was just a story of playing harder than anyone else and making a few forays overseas. But, you know, going down in debt to the ANZ Bank in Chatswood, New South Wales, and coming back, paying it off again and going out again, you know, like a bunch of soldiers.
Beds Are Burning was the song that the Oils played during the closing ceremony to the Olympic Games. You may remember the band dressed in black with Sorry written down the side of their overalls. I caught up with Rob Hurst recently and asked him how it all came about.
I was sort of in the pro camp because I'd been working on an Olympic album with some of the athletes that were going to be involved, and I really thought that this is something we should do, but once again only on our terms and if we could find a context for it. But there was a lot of toing and froing, and Gary was out there, our manager as well, and he suggested that perhaps that we should play The Dead Hard or Beds. We weren't sure. And then word came in that we had an ally in there. One of the folks in the Olympics said, look, if you want to make some kind of statement about this, go ahead and do it, and I don't know about it, okay? So we thought, well, if Yothu Yindi come in and if they do Treaty and we can find a context next to them, this is going to make more sense again. And they came back, the Olympic people came back and said, we really want Beds Are Burning. It's kind of the song that the international audience still knows best.
But did they get it, in the context that a song like Beds Are Burning is?
Absolutely, everyone got it. It was clear. And then the idea, I think was Gary's, once again, why don't we go a step further? Because the whole Sorry debate was on at the time. And, the idea came up, was to put the old overalls on, which we hadn't worn for years, which had been that kind of thing that if you go right back to the Capitol Theatre, you see Martin in the overalls. It was kind of our thing. And plaster it with Sorry, which my mother actually, from the distance, mistook as Sony. So she thought it was some corporate sponsorship deal and chastised me greatly until I explained what had happened. But right up until literally the last couple of minutes, because we weren't able to put the overalls on. So
it was like a commando thing, was it?
It was. We weren't able to show anyone except our go-between that knew that we were going to do this. Right up until the last minute. So imagine, it's a bit like the Christians and the Lions, we're sort of in the wings and we're looking out through the tunnel where we're going to come out, and we see, the whole Olympic thing happening. It's going all around the world, and we know it's going to have a bigger audience. We know it could really backfire in our faces. But we're compelled to go ahead and do it. So we strip off the black overalls that we had and over the Sorry suits, and we come out, and immediately we start getting positive feedback from the people that are closest to us. But instinctively we knew, that we'd done the right thing, and the gesture had been well received.
If there's ever been an Australian band who have worn their politics on their sleeve, it's been Midnight Oil. Their songs were inspired by reconciliation, green issues, and an anti-nuclear outlook at a time when nuclear marches over the world were drawing huge crowds. And they not only made people sweat and have a great time at their shows, they left them with something to think about.
Once it picked up steam and momentum, so much stuff was coming at us constantly. I mean, people were really landing stuff on us from every corner of the country to begin with, and then every corner of the globe. By the end of the 80s, our little office in Glebe, it was just swelling, with stuff that was hitting us.
Was it a heavy burden?
Well, it was a heavy burden in the sense that you can't do all these things for people. You can't play all the benefit concerts, around. You can't be all things to all people, and you certainly can't do it, in every part of the world. So, it evolved into something, and it also just made us realise that what we first sung about, in some ways, when you're singing songs, when you start a band, I think most musicians would agree with this, it's very much throwaway. You might have laboured over it when you're at high school, over the poem, but when you actually get in there, you do chuck it. And what happened to Midnight Oil was that what we chucked, what the writers were throwing out and what we were throwing out in performance and then with our records, ended up becoming a huge set of realities that came back and said, well, actually, yeah, you're right. Now come and help us. And that was pretty frightening, because it actually meant that things were as bad as what we kind of had imagined them to be creatively. But it also meant that there weren't that many people out there who were prepared to pick up the shovel or pick up the bandage.
Pete's political rants were always a big part of a Midnight Oil show.